Simon felt it first in his teeth, a dull ache that pulsed every time he walked past the butcher shop on the corner of Main Street. At first he thought it was a cavity, the result of too many late-night indulgences in sweets. But no matter how often he brushed, the ache deepened. His dentist found nothing wrong, yet Simon couldn't shake the sensation that something within him was changing. It started with the cravings. The smell of seared steak no longer appealed to him, nor did the slow-cooked stews his sister Sammy loved to make. Instead, his mouth watered when he passed strangers on the street. It terrified him. He stopped going out, afraid of what he might do. One evening, Sammy brought home dinner, a roasted chicken with golden skin, its scent filling their small apartment. Simon forced himself to sit at the table, but the smell made him nauseous. As Sammy sliced into the bird, Simon found himself staring at her hands, the thin skin stretched over her knuckles, the pale blue veins beneath. It all seemed unbearably appetizing. "What's wrong?" Sammy asked, her voice tinged with concern. "I'm not hungry," he muttered, pushing away his plate. That night the dreams began. In them, Simon prowled through darkened streets, his senses sharper than they'd ever been. He could hear the heartbeat of a man in a nearby alley, smell the faint tang of blood beneath his skin. In the dreams, he gave in to the hunger, tearing flesh with teeth that felt too sharp, too strong. He'd wake drenched in sweat, his mouth dry, his heart racing. By the end of the week, Simon could no longer ignore what was happening to him. He isolated himself, locking the apartment door while Sammy was out on a date with Marshall. He avoided her touch, afraid of what he might feel if her hand lingered too long on his arm. One evening, as the hunger gnawed at him, Simon ventured online, desperate for answers. He found obscure forums discussing similar transformations, accounts of people who claimed to have experienced a primal shift, a return to some ancient, forbidden instinct. They called it the awakening. "Embrace it," one user had written. "The more you resist, the worse it gets." Simon slammed his laptop shut, horrified. But the seed was planted. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. Anna had grown frustrated with his withdrawal and insisted on having a serious conversation. She sat him down, her eyes brimming with tears. "Simon, you're scaring me. You're not eating. You're not sleeping. What's going on?" He wanted to tell her, to explain the monstrous urges clawing at his insides. But how could he? She would leave. She would run. Sammy reached out, cupping his face. "Please," she whispered. Her warmth broke him. He pulled away, but not before the scent of her skin overwhelmed him. Without thinking, he leaned in and bit her shoulder. Just a graze, but enough to draw blood. Sammy screamed, shoving him away. Simon stumbled back, horrified at himself. She clutched her shoulder, eyes wide with a mix of pain and betrayal. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she shrieked. "I'm sorry," Simon gasped. "I don't know what's happening to me." She fled, slamming the door behind her. Simon sank to the floor, blood smeared across his lips. The taste was intoxicating, a dark satisfaction coursing through him even as shame consumed him. Over the next few days, Simon wrestled with his humanity. He sought help but found none. How could he explain his hunger without being locked away? The forums became his only refuge, their twisted sense of community offering comfort in his darkest hours. But the transformation was relentless. His teeth grew sharper, his senses more acute. He no longer recognized the man in the mirror, his once kind eyes now cold and predatory. One night, unable to fight this hunger any longer, Simon ventured into the city. The streets were alive with oblivious strangers, their laughter and chatter masking the predator among them. Simon knew he had crossed a line he could never return from. Yet as he disappeared into the shadows, he realized he no longer cared. The hunger was his master now, and there was no turning back. The transformation was complete.